Feel free to chant japa while we are preparing a bit of knowledge. Today is Handava Nirjal Ekadashi. Nice day to chant extra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
No? Yes, gentle, etc. Welcome to all of you who have just come later than yesterday morning. Today, I want to discuss a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, because in our seminar, we are discussing Canto 5. The translation is working. Great. And I want to share with you something which I presented. It's already about 2 years ago. I was invited to give a talk at Bhaktivedanta Institute of Higher Studies in Gainesville, Florida. They were holding a conference on the subject of Vedic cosmology. And they invited me to speak, and I said, "What? Who? Me? What do I know about Vedic cosmology?" They said, no, we want you to speak about hermeneutics. Now, hermeneutics for some people is what we call a dirty word in English. What would be the Serbian Croatian for hermeneutics?
Hermeneutic.
Same. Hermeneutic. Now, even though you may hear the Serbo-Croatian word, you may not know what it means. So I hope by the end of this presentation, you'll have some idea. But a short translation of it would simply be interpretation. Now, those of you who read Srila Prabhupada's books, and I know you all read Srila Prabhupada's books, and you may also hear some of his lectures, you may know that sometimes Srila Prabhupada would say, "Don't interpret. Don't interpret." Well, I'm going to interpret that statement by Srila Prabhupada. And I'm going to venture to say that what he means is, don't misinterpret. Okay? And because if we don't interpret, it means we are like dead stone. We are not getting any meaning whatsoever from what we hear or what we read or what we see. When someone smiles at us, we interpret that smile. Oh, they are somehow pleased. So that's an interpretation. Okay, let me get organized here. So I pray that you will bear with me on this exploration. We'll start now with a verse from 5th canto, but we will, I think, not attempt to chant it together because it's not exactly a verse. It's prose, as is much of this portion of this 5th canto. So I'll read this and we'll go to the translation. And before we go to the purport, I have some things to try to explain. We'll see how this goes. The context of this verse, I'll say, is it's in the 16th chapter, and this chapter is describing Jambudvipa, and it's also describing Mount Meru, and it's describing the rivers that come down from Mount Meru. So we're getting some, you could say, cosmic, Puranic geography. Yes, so just before this has described one tree, which is a jambu fruit tree, a rose apple tree, which is gigantic. Okay, here's first the Sanskrit of the verse. Tavat ubayorapi rodha surya mrittika tat rasena anuvidyamana afarka samyoga vipakena sadamara lokavaranam jambunalam nama suvarnam bhavati yat uha bhava vibudhadaya saha yuvativir mukata kataka kati sutra dyavaranam yagna kalu dhanayanti. Well, what does all of this mean? The mud on both banks of the river Jambu Nadi being moistened, by the flowing juice and then dried by the air and the sunshine produces huge quantities of gold called Jambu Nada. The denizens of heaven use this gold for various kinds of ornaments. Therefore, all the inhabitants of the heavenly planets and their youthful wives are fully decorated with golden helmets, bangles, and belts, and thus they enjoy life. Okay, so this is describing a process by which jambu fruit becomes gold. And we may ask the question, how does that work? How are we to understand this? It's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is describing Param Satyam, the supreme truth. And now we're hearing about jambu fruits, rose apple fruits becoming gold. Have any of you seen this happen? Rose apple fruit becoming gold? No. Has seen? If you have seen, please tell us about it. This will be very interesting. So because we have not seen, this may raise some questions in our minds, some doubt possibly. So now, before I show the next slide, let me explain that in our seminar yesterday, I explained that as we read Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes we may draw from sources outside of what we usually identify with the Srimad Bhagavatam in order to appreciate the Bhagavatam, including from Western traditions. So here, what I've done in my presentation in the Bhaktivedanta Institute is I introduced a 20th century philosopher, Alfred Korzybski, who is most famous for this phrase. He said, "The map is not the territory." The map is not the territory. What does he mean by that? Is kind of explained in this diagram. You start on the left side. There's reality, whatever that is. And on the far right, what we end up with after processing reality through our senses and then through conceptual filters, through our very limited understanding, we end up with something we call a map. If we want to get from point A to point B, it was quite challenging for us to come to this place because we didn't have internet connection. But first you locate where you are on the map, and then you see, okay, I have to go straight here, and then left there, and then right there, according to this map. But we know the map is giving us the representation of the reality of the roads. Okay? Now, essentially what Korzybski is saying here resonates with something which we understand in our Vedic tradition, and that is that we have imperfect senses. We tend to make mistakes. There is a tendency to cheat, and we have the problem of illusion. So he kind of recognized this and elaborated extensively on this point, not to give up conditioned knowledge, but to understand its limits. Okay, well, now we may ask, what is the relation between the Bhagavatam's descriptions? They are written, they are linguistic representations, we might say, and the actualities, the reality which is out there, because especially in this part of Bhagavatam, the claim is that we're getting a description of the universe, of a place called Jambudvipa, which is sometimes associated with what is now present-day India. How do we, what kind of a relationship is there? Well, maybe we need to do some interpretation to see what is this relationship. Well, in the West, oops, sorry. No, that goes twice, okay. What is the relation between the Bhagavatam's descriptions and the actualities out there? This is the question that we want to look at. And in the West, there is a tradition of what's called philosophical hermeneutics. It's been understood. We have a challenge. How do we interpret what we read? And this became a big issue in Germany in the 19th century and then the 20th century. Four of these persons named were German, and the last, Paul Ricoeur, was French. So they were wrestling, especially it was an issue with what is written in the Bible. People started to question how to understand these statements in the Bible. And so they wrote so much to try to understand how to understand. Friedrich Schleiermacher, Wilhelm Wilde, Martin Heidegger, 20th century, Hans-Georg Gadamer, and Paul Ricoeur. And I read some of this and decided that most interesting for us will be some thoughts from Hans-Georg Gadamer, who wrote, again, extensively, and what you're getting is digestion of digestion of digestion to try to get some essential ideas. One of his ideas is, well, if we want to understand this reality out there, we need to talk. We need to have dialogue. We need to dialogue. We need to converse with others who have different perspectives, because, well, we have two eyes, but all of us together have many eyes, and maybe that can help to understand, which is what we're interested in. We want to understand things. He also emphasized the need to be what's called reflexive. To be reflexive is to be not reflective, but yes, reflective, but also reflexive. And reflexive means to acknowledge the position that we are standing in. Where do I stand? So for Gadamer, he might have said, well, I'm raised in the 20th century in Germany, and so because of the limitations of my position, I have to acknowledge this. I was not born in Egypt or in India or wherever in some other century. I am in this position, and that's relevant. Well, I keep forgetting to change it. There. Okay, are you with me so far? Good. I'm sorry, or I don't know if I want to apologize exactly, but I want to say, I know this is a different style of Bhagavatam class, but I thought, why not? Let's have something a little different, and hopefully it will get some of our thinking juices going, and thinking is part of the devotional process. A third point that he makes is that what he's calling hermeneutics acknowledges the role of our own biases and traditions. What would be a word in Croatian, Serbian for bias? Pristrasno. Pristrasno. Yeah? Pristranost. 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 It only took me 10 minutes to figure it out.
Both are correct.
Oh, both are correct. Now it's okay. Yeah, to acknowledge we are coming to whatever it is we're reading with some preconceptions. Just to admit that is an important step, he said. And then the fourth point he's making is that while seeking to cross over, to bridge the gap between our horizon, which is limited, and the horizons of others, we have to listen. We have to listen. We have to listen to others. Okay, now, moving forward. All right. Again, this is now, credit all goes to Professor Goranga. He says, we can think of hermeneutics in three perspectives. Well, actually, he spoke of two, and the third one was Paul Ricoeur, but he says there's the hermeneutics of consent. Now we need a word for consent. I consent. I accept. Prihočení. Oh, she has it. I don't know. Privačení. Privačení. Oh, with the H. Prihavachani. Yes. We got it. Prihavachani. So the hermeneutics of Prihavachani is acceptance. Yes. So that's one style, you could say, of interpretation. That I'm reading this and I'm going to accept what it says. That's my starting point. Now this may sound familiar to you. That's a very Vaishnava thing to do. But the story is a little more complicated. There's also the hermeneutics of suspicion. Suspicion. Sumya. Sumya. Yeah, that sounds very suspicious. Okay. What Gadamer wants to introduce is what he calls integrative hermeneutics. Integrative. Integrativna.
No, we don't know. It must be some integrativski.
Integrativski. Whoa. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to the Bhagavatam. And let's go to another verse in the 16th chapter of Canto 5. And let's hear what Vijayadvaja Tirtha, a 15th century Acharya of the Madhva Sampradaya, what does he say? He's talking about this fruit, this jambu fruit, and he says, the words of Vyasa, an ocean of infinite wisdom, cannot be doubted. And according to him, details regarding the world, such as the earth's sheaths or layers, should be taken as per the Bhagavad. Any other text, in case of contradiction, should be reconciled as required. Okay. Reconciled? Po,
Pomiren,
pomiren. Pomiren. Okay, different words. Now, what is he talking about? Different other texts. He's talking about other Puranas, which can sometimes give a different description of the universe, or he might be referring to some other, what we broadly call Vedic texts, right? Okay. Now, hold on to your seats, because now it gets, the plot gets even thicker. Because he, Vijay Vajatirtha, goes on to say, quote, the size of an elephant, and that comes in that verse before, that these jambu fruits are the size of an elephant, okay? He says, is meant to perceive the fullness and not actual dimension. Now at this point, we might say, oh, good. Relief. We can interpret that this is just making a point about its fullness, and so it's a normal fruit, but maybe it's a little bit bigger than a mango or something. But no, he goes on to say, the actual size is mentioned in Vayu Purana as, quote, sages who directly and truly perceive entities, Rishivi Tattvadarshini, have told the fruits to be 861 aratnis. This is an aratni from the elbow to the small finger. 861 times half a meter. That's the size of the jambu fruit. This elephant is a very big elephant. The size of something like 4 football fields. Oh, we're getting deeper into trouble. Speaking of elephants, we'll call it this. You know this expression, there's an elephant in the room? Yeah. So we may say this sounds like literalism. Interpretation, literal interpretation. And we find that Srila Prabhupada, in the vast majority of cases in the Bhagavatam, interprets literally, as do our previous acharyas most of the time. However, there are examples of multiple interpretations in the Bhagavatam by our commentators. For example, Sanatana Goswami, in his Brihad Vaishnava Toshani commentary on the 10th canto, he loves to say, Yadva, he will give an interpretation, and then he will say, Yadva, or else. It can be taken this way. And then, again, Yadva, and he'll give another interpretation. All the time keeping strictly to the Sanskrit, but understood sometimes in different ways. Or, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives allegorical interpretations of Krishna's childhood demon killing leelas. You may think of an example. Anyone want to give us an example where he speaks of the killing of, say, Putana as the quote-unquote killing of one of the anarthas in the heart? Does anyone remember which anartha in this case? Putana, yes.
Putana is, there are 2 meanings. One is false guru,
False guru,
and the other is one's own mind.
one's own mind, yes. So like that, he goes through, I think it's 22 demons, and he interprets. However, it's not that he denies the literal meaning. He doesn't deny that there is Krishna and there is Putana, and Krishna killed Putana. Rather, he adds this, you could say, a kind of layer of interpretation. Okay, so now we're starting to think about interpreting the Bhagavatam possibly in a more complex way. But now we're talking about the cosmology of the Bhagavatam, and here I'm coming into what I'm suggesting we could call integrative hermeneutics using God. Richard Thompson, Sadhaputta Prabhu, wrote several books, and one of his books, Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, he says, there are multiple versions and variations of cosmology and cosmography in the various Puranas, in the Mahabharata, and in Jain and Buddhist texts. The Mahabharata has a much less developed interpretation. So, okay, then, but what does Shastras say that might help us? So I've said traditional Shastric hermeneutics to the rescue. So with the fire hose is coming a statement from the Vedanta Sutra, also known as Brahma Sutra. Tattu samanvayat. The sutras are often very, very short, and this has been translated, and we may say interpreted, to mean Lord Krishna is the conclusion. Conclusion of what? Conclusion of Shastra, because of the totality of all scriptural statements. Samanvayat is the word that's being translated by the second line, because of the totality of all scriptural statements. Tat is referring to scriptural statements, and tu just says however or indeed. Where is Lord Krishna in this? That is from one of our acharyas, I believe, Srila Baladev Vidya Bhushan is saying this. Okay, so then, this is following a principle of the Shastric hermeneutics process, and this has been developed by our ISKCON GBC Shastra Advisory Council, something many of you are not aware exists, but it does. And we spent, I think it was at least 2 years developing a process or a system to help us to understand Vaishnava, Gaudiya Vaishnava hermeneutics under the shelter of our previous acharyas, most especially Srila Prabhupada. And in this we developed, or we identified 24 principles and 40 tools for dealing with Shastra. Now someone is going to ask, where do we find this? You may not find it yet because it hasn't been published yet. But yes, it needs to come out eventually. This principle, what is this principle? It is the principle of the part and the whole. And coming back to Gadamer, he speaks of the hermeneutic circle. Here it says hermeneutic cycle. You have a text, you read it, you interpret what you read, this leads you perhaps back to the same text or to another text, but a related one. Again, you read, you think, you interpret. This process, it's a process. It keeps going. It's an ongoing back and forth process, not leading to a static, once and forever understanding. Rather, we would say it's leading to an ecstatic understanding. Okay, so, all right, yes, now you're thinking, so what? Part and whole. So here I'm trying to represent sort of many Shastric statements, perhaps all in the Bhagavatam or beyond the Bhagavatam, other Shastra. And what do we understand to be in the center of this circle of interpretation? What we will find from a part-whole analysis is not surprising. The Bhagavatam's cosmology is embedded in a worldview, which is, I'm using my academic language here, excuse me, a worldview centered on divinity. And divinity is thoroughly embedded in the Bhagavata's cosmology. So let's think again, the hermeneutics of, what was it, consent? No, consent. Yes, that. That seems to constitute Bhagavata hermeneutics practice, prioritizes, how do you say that? Makes first, makes number one, bhakti at every step. Bhakti is at the center. It's located at the center of the hermeneutic circle. And I would say also that Dharma is very much in the center of the circle, because it's very closely bound with Bhakti, in our tradition especially. Okay, but wait, how does all of this, what does this have to do with jambu fruit and elephants and gold? Please stay tuned. Are we okay so far? Do you need to stand up and stretch? Okay, I'll take the silence as consent. I've already said this, okay. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to linger, I'm pausing now before we go to the jambu fruit topic to say, again, there is this hermeneutics of suspicion, and three persons were identified by Paul Ricoeur as masters of suspicion, namely, and these are identified by Srila Prabhupada as, I don't know if he actually said the biggest demons, but something like that. He said, he mentioned Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and Friedrich Nietzsche as, masters of suspicion. What is this suspicion? I mentioned also Jacques Derrida, 20th century, but that's another topic for another day. So what is this suspicion? The straightforward meaning of texts, according to this system of hermeneutics, is regarded as deceptive. Or it may be self-deceptive. The explicit text hides deeper meanings and implications, What sort of deeper meanings and implications? Especially with respect to establishing and maintaining power over others and oppression of others. Okay, that's what a lot of what we call postmodern hermeneutics is about. We don't go with what it says here. We're going to read between the lines. We're going to be suspicious. What are they actually saying? They are saying, aha, I see now. What they're really saying is, and so on. Why are they saying it? Because they want to maintain or they want to establish power over others. Some people read the Vedas with the hermeneutics of suspicion. Some people read the Bhagavatam with hermeneutics of suspicion. So I'm just putting this there for you to be aware of, because I think in this time, we live in a time of intense circulation of ideas, and some ideas may be confusing for devotees. Now, texts always simultaneously reveal and conceal. This is a basic idea of hermeneutics of suspicion. Yes, they tell us something. They also hide something. Oh, okay. Now, I have mentioned here also that within the Vedic texts, there are, especially in the Rig Veda, there are riddles. And it seems that there were games being practiced by these Vedic Brahmins. They would be challenged to solve riddles. What's the word for riddle? No. What? Zagonetica. Yeah. So there are zagonetiki in the Rig Veda. Plural, zagonetike. Zagonetike in the Rig Veda. They're called Brahmodya contests, where they're trying to discover meanings. I also want to mention that in the Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 21, verse 35, Lord Krishna tells Uddhava that he likes indirect language. He likes it when things are not said in a straightforward way. And we may say, if we have a chance, oh, Krishna, why don't you tell us everything straight? This is Krishna. Okay. We could say more about hermeneutics of suspicion, but let's go to integrative hermeneutics, and let's come back to Sadhavbhuta Prabhu. And here I'm using his writing as an example of what we're calling integrative hermeneutics. What does he do in some of his books? Sadhavbhuta Prabhu maps the Bhagavata's 5th canto descriptions onto contemporary geographic and cosmographic accounts. And how he does this, the reasoning, the logic behind his doing this, is what he calls the context-sensitive model concept. Okay, some explanation of this. Oops. Oh. Okay, so quoting him now, in his book that I mentioned before, in the Bhagavatam, the context-sensitive approach was rendered particularly appropriate by the conviction that reality in the ultimate issue is avak manasam, or beyond the reach of the mundane mind or words. Now, this may echo a little bit with Alfred Korzybski's map is not territory. We won't go there now. This implies that a literal one-to-one model of reality is unattainable. And so, one may as well pack as much meaning as possible into a necessarily incomplete description of the universe. So he says, one might as well bring it all together as much as you can to get some idea of how wonderful the universe is. Okay? And so, Sadhaputta Prabhu affirms that the map is not the territory. This applies to the Bhagavatam's cosmographic descriptions because they are necessarily incomplete. The relationship between the map and the territory is complex, and it is made more meaningful for us by showing connections to modern cosmographic understandings. That's what he, Sadhaputta Prabhu, tries to do in his explanations. Okay. He also, incidentally, acknowledges figurative language. And this we also find in Vedic hermeneutics. So he says, for example, he encloses words in quotation marks, islands. So when you put it in quotation marks, that's indicating, that's showing that you're taking it not in a literal way, but in a non-literal way, figurative. So he says islands, oceans. Okay. This in talking about the rings of Bhumandala. Continuing. Again, quoting from Sadhaputta Prabhu, the geography of Bhumandala encodes a combination of astronomical and geographical maps, which is both rational and scientific. So he wants really to bring it together with modern science. It appears that the elements of Bhumandala geography have either been introduced or adapted to convey a number of meaningful messages. Not one message, but many messages, some of which may still remain obscure. They may be riddles, I suggest. And this process may be linked to the historical development of Puranic cosmology. Wow. The fact that he says that is quite radical for the hermeneutics of consent. And so, what is that? Well, maybe it's not exactly hermeneutics of consent. As a reminder, we have 3 different types of hermeneutics. Those of consent, of suspicion, and integrative hermeneutics. And now we're coming to a conclusion. Don't worry. But I say the question remains, okay, Prabhupada in his commentary to the verse we started with, and now I have to admit I need a moment to get it. This is chapter Okay, now we come to the Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse, which we read about the jambu fruit becoming gold. Okay? I won't read the whole report. Prabhupada says, the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, the rivers on some planets produce gold on their banks. The poor inhabitants of this earth, because of their incomplete knowledge, are captivated by a so-called Bhagavan who can produce a small quantity of gold. Now, Srila Prabhupada, we may want to say, but Prabhupada, please explain about this jambu fruit and gold. He's not going to talk about that. What he's going to say is, later, I guess, in his purport, he says, it is understood that in a higher planetary system in this material world, the mud, and then he just repeats what it says, the mud on the banks of the Jambu Nadi mixes with jambu fruit, reacts with the sunshine and the air, and automatically produces huge quantities of gold. Okay, but what does that mean? It is understood. What is this it? Who is understanding? We're not understanding. Maybe some demigods are understanding. Maybe the acharyas understand. But what is Prabhupada saying here? I think what he's saying, and this is my guess, he's saying it's not important. What's important is, and then it's what's in his purport. The first point he makes is there are cheaters who are supposedly manifesting gold out of thin air or whatever. So that's one point he's making. Another point he is making, the main point I think he's making, is about the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he quotes, Ainanda tanu chakin karang patitam mam vishane bhavam buddho kripayan tavapada Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya, the humble devotee simply prays to the Lord, kindly pick me up from the material world, which is full of varieties of material opulence, including jambu fruits that turn into gold, and demigods that wear the gold. And it's full of people who think that it's a great thing to go to the heavenly planets and wear that gold. The universe is full of that. But Lord Chaitanya says, full of varieties of material opulence, and keep me under the shelter of your lotus feet. And then he quotes Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Ha ha Prabhu Nanda Shuddha, Rishabhanu Sutta Jutta, Karuna Karaha Evara, Narottamo Dasakoi, Nakali Horangapai, Tomabine Keache Amar. O my Lord, O son of Nanda Maharaj, now you are standing before me with your consort, the daughter of Rishabhanu, Srimati Radharani. Kindly accept me as the dust of your lotus feet. Please do not kick me away, for I have no other shelter. And then he paraphrases Prabodhananda Saraswati. He says, he indicates that the position of the demigods, who are decorated with golden helmets and other ornaments, so he comes back to the verse, he's commenting on this verse about gold, is no better than a phantasmagoria, Tridasa Pur Akasha Pushpayate. A devotee, in his final statement, a devotee is never allured by such opulences. What's the word for allured? Obamanyuta. Obmanuta. Ne obmanuta. Right? Okay. He simply aspires to become the dust. So there was mud, there were jambu fruits, there was gold. What does a devotee aspire for? To become dust. What kind of dust? The dust from the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So, okay, but still, I don't know. I still worried about the jambu fruits. So we're almost there, but this is a little curiosity that I found. If one is still worried about jambu fruits and this big mountain and so on, I just came across this, and it's pure speculation. Now I'm announcing, this is speculation. And I'm wondering, is Mount Meru the Puranic version of the Rig-Vedic copper pillar? Copper pillar? What is that? In the Rig Veda, its pillar has a golden garment, copper. It flashes in the sky like a whip. It is erected in a fortunate or a fertile field. We would like to get honey from the seat. All right? In the breaking of dawn, when the sun rises, you ascend the golden-shaped seat, the bronze pillar, O Mitra, O Varuna. From there, you see boundlessness and the bounded. Hare Krishna. Try interpreting that. That's why we have Srimad Bhagavatam. Nigama kalpataror galitam palam shukamugat amrita dravasamritam. The amrita of the Veda is found in the Bhagavatam. Therefore, pibata Bhagavatam rasam alagam muhur aho rasika buddhi bhavaka. Keep reading Srimad Bhagavatam and keep relishing it, whether or not we understand it or not. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam, keep Srila Prabhupada. I will stop there and beg your forgiveness for taking you on this rather unusual journey, perhaps. But if anyone has a comment or a question, I see Vasudhara has 2 fingers up. I hope that doesn't mean he has 2.
Hare Krishna. Just one short question. Is there any practicality at all that devotees are?
Is there any what?
Practical use when devotees are, how to say, sketching or drawing these circles? Because Saraswati Prabhu said that might be not directly salts and oceans. It's quite strange, all these circles with all these so-called oceans. What do you think?
Is there any practicality
To draw
to
this,
make
like
diagrams?
in that way, because it's not like that. It seems to be.
Well, maybe it is like that, but in such a way that we haven't really grasped. In his books that I've seen, Siddhartha has diagrams and he shows circles and, giant towers of Meru and so on. And he makes points using those. So they might be starting points for understanding. And the language is there. It's not that the Sanskrit is incomprehensible. It's translatable. And I might mention, though, an interesting comment that I heard from one devotee who was with Srila Prabhupada while he was translating the 5th canto. Srila Prabhupada said, I don't know how this is. I'm just translating. And if you read the commentaries, most of the translations of the commentaries, they're just repeating and clarifying maybe some Sanskrit here and there, and maybe referring to the Vayu Purana, as we read. And Shukadeva Goswami, in the very beginning, before he starts his beginning of his response to Maharaj Parikshit's question, is describing the universe. No one can do that in a comprehensive way. So I am just going to speak what I've heard, basically. So, and then again at the end he says something similar. Yeah. Yes. Microphones.
Thank you for the lecture. I wanted to ask, is it that everything what happens to us, based how I understood that based on Shastra, everything has like some external and internal reason. So is it also that in our everyday life that occurrences in different situations, is that also that everything has internal and external reason or not? How would you explain?
Does everything that happened to us have internal and external reasons? Whether we want to put a sharp line between internal and external, or whether we want to just think in terms of depth and height. So I would say like this, everything that happens to us, we are, first of all, we are also we also have agency, as in English we would say, ethics, philosophy. We have agency, we are kartri, we are doers. But the Bhagavad Gita qualifies how much we are doers. We are very minimally doers when it comes to being in this material world and being under the control, under the influence of the gunas. Yes, we are agents, and therefore it's not that just everything is happening to us. We are also causing things to happen. And it's that point which I think is sort of step one in interpreting our experience. We are somehow involved in, we are, if we want to put it negatively, we are implicated in everything. We somehow or other have made some choice which puts us where we are. So in interpreting our experience, there's so much that could be said, but I would say we may sometimes, to go along with how you put it, we may think, oh, I understand how some meaning of this, but let me see if I can go deeper. Let me see if I can understand more deeply what's happening and what I'm causing to happen. And it may well be that the deeper understanding is, yes, I am an agent, I have a choice. And I need to see how to make good choice for the good, rather than according to my my indriyas. Indriyani paranya or indriya paramana. Manasastu param buddhe. Yo buddhe pratastusa. I have buddhi, I have discrimination, and that is higher than my manas, my mind, which is usually very preoccupied with the senses, which in turn are preoccupied with sense objects. But I have buddhi, yo buddhe paratastu saha, and he, that is you, the soul, are even above, higher, you are more refined, you are greater than your discriminating activity. Does that make any sense? Sometimes.
Well, yes, to some extent. But I mean, more like of course, I understand we are also like agents, and we are involved in everything that happens to us and around us. But I mean, sometimes, some arrangements, what we like to say, happen. So are we also cause of that arrangements because we are also not controller?
Of course, many things happen where we feel I have absolutely nothing to do with this. It's happened. But there's our awareness of things happening. And what do we do with that awareness? That becomes also a matter of choice. How do we interpret what we see and hear and read about, things happening on the other side of the planet? What do we do with understanding maybe we hear about anthropogenic climate change, and we wonder how does that relate to me? I think it's good that we think about these things. And we think always we want to bring Krishna in the center of our thinking. And that can mean also then turning from that thought to what does Krishna say? What does Krishna say? Or what do acharyas say? It's my experience that opening Bhagavad Gita, sometimes randomly, can make so much clear about what's happening to me, or what I perceive, or what I see as happening. Sometimes randomly, or sometimes just remembering. Therefore, we also study Shastra, so that relevant points of Shastra come to our mind. The idea that acharyas give us is we want to become Shastra Chakshus, which means seeing through the eyes of Shastra. Well, how are we going to see through the eyes of Shastra unless we know what is in Shastra? Therefore, we keep reading, we keep hearing, and we keep discussing. And discussing means also working to integrate. So coming back to integrative hermeneutics. How can I integrate what I hear, what I read into my understanding? And there's a word for this in Sanskrit. There's shravanam, is hearing. There's mananam, basically thinking, which hopefully uses buddhi, intelligence. And then there's nididhyasanam, which I like to say means digesting. Digestion is a very mysterious process. We shouldn't talk about this today because many of us may be fasting, but we put something into the mouth, we swallow it, and then what? God knows, right? Well, of course, cell biologists can tell us so many things, but even there, they're actually quite bewildered and amazed by the very nitty-gritty details. I read there's an estimate by biologists that there's, I think the number was 20,000, there's some 20,000 functions in the body which are not understood by science. But my point is nididhasanam, shravanam, mananam, and then nididhasanam. Nididhasanam takes time. It takes time. And what do we do while we're digesting? Huh?
Being patient.
Being patient, but what else do we do? We just sit there and wait.
Purifying our resistance.
Purify existence, okay. And how do we do that? Cheto Darpana Marjana. What does that mean? Cheto Darpana Marjana. What is Marjana?
Clean.
What is Darpana?
Mirror.
Hmm?
Mirror.
Mirror, yeah. What is Cheta? Mind, heart, consciousness, yes. Cheto Darpana Marjanam, and then etc. Bhava Mahadava. So the Marjanam is one of the results of what? Param Vijayate Sankirtanam. Right? Yes. Maharaj.
I want to congratulate you for your insight. Honestly.
Could you be so kind to go back to the slide of his good name is Kojevsky or
Korzybski.
How do you
K-O-R-Z. K-O-R-Z-Y-B, I think, S-K-I. Korzybski.
Yes,
Alfred.
Alfred. Korzybski, yes. He had a very interesting way to interpret perception. There is a reality, our senses look on it, and we have filters. What were the filters? I'm very interested because Giordani has given seven filters which we have when we look at reality. One is we only accept what our gross senses tell us, and others we are biased by scientific understanding, but also by religious dogma. And seven. I would be very interested is it possible to go back to that slide of this Korzybski?
Well, I don't think we can project it so quickly, but I can. Here, and I have to say, I got this diagram off the internet. It's not directly from Korzybski. So, for filters, it just mentions deletion, distortion, and generalization. Deletion, distortion, and generalization.
That's very
What's slide number 4?
There are many more. Yes, but
Of course, one can expand
Yeah,
each of these.
okay.
Yeah.
Here it is. Yes.
But you prompt me to say one more thing, which I didn't say in all of this. And that is because I don't think we feel satisfied to say that the Bhagavatam is a map and there's something else which is different, and that's the territory. And I haven't developed this idea, but I'll put it out there. It seems to me that on a certain level, with the Bhagavatam, the map becomes the territory. And I think this is what happens in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Lord Chaitanya hears the Bhagavatam and falls in trance. The map becomes the territory. It just becomes the absolute. Just hearing it. He doesn't have to wait and digest. It's right there. That is why we read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Charitamrita describes the ideal reader of the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, this is a mystical approach, falling into another reality, really. Really. Maharaj, I have, since 5 years, I don't ask any longer the question, what do I see? I ask the question, what do I not see?
Yeah.
Because there are so much more than our
Yes.
senses and mind.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm very well, very good. And Gadama, yes, very. You have a way to take essences out, and yes, you're a teacher. Yes, I guess what a professor does. Very, yeah, I could follow everything. Of course, millions of things to be said, but that's not wonderful.
Do we have time for more? We're not having breakfast, I think. So, let's take over the number.
Thank you for the lecture. At the beginning of your lecture, you said that we are almost obliged to interpret whatever is happening to us. And if we say that interpretation is also a kind of assumption what something means, is it true?
Is it true that it involves assumptions?
Yeah, like if I interpret something, then I assume this means that. For instance, my daughter comes to me, I didn't give her something, and she's like angry, and then she tells me, I don't like you, you're not my father anymore. So I no, it's just an example. And then I interpret it, okay, she loves me, but now she didn't get what she wants. Then I assume it's like this, but maybe it's not. And then in conflict resolutions, I was told that wrong assumption is the reason for most conflicts. So what would you advise us? We are obliged to interpret, to make assumptions. At the same time, wrong assumptions will give us trouble. So what would be your advice?
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Nice question. This kind of gets into the bigger region of interpretation. I would here refer again to Gadamer, who emphasizes reflexivity, where you hear your daughter say this, and you make your assumption, and the next thing is you think, I'm making an assumption. Now let's see if it's true. And then you take further steps. Or now let us talk more with my daughter and and see what's the problem behind what she says. Maybe she's communicating with her limited vocabulary. What is she communicating? Her anger, and so on and so forth. But you would start with, yes, I'm making an assumption here. And that's natural, and that's also necessary. But I can correct the assumption. I have that ability. So, yeah, that gets into, as you said, conflict resolution is very much about correcting inaccurate assumptions. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for the thought-provoking class. And thank you especially for the last point of making the distinction between what might be important and what might be not so important. So you broke it in these elements, maybe they're not so important to the main message and practice of bhakti. For example, higher planetary systems, what happens there. And what's most important is the essential message of bhakti. So when making this distinction, however, I'm maybe choosing to gently push away, cover, or not look at some parts of a whole, these less important parts. But this might negatively impact my shraddha, my faith, in the wider system as a whole. Do you have any recommendations for making this distinction in a way where it doesn't negatively impact my shraddha?
Very good, very good. Thank you. Let's see what I can do with this. And maybe I'll get some help from Satyananda Swami. The first thing I would do is call up the value of patience. And rather than saying this is less important and therefore this might affect my faith, say this is less important for me now than to understand the core principle of bhakti, the core understanding that behind everything is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Let me put this aside for now. And in course of time, it may come more back into my attention when something else I understand, which presently I don't understand. An example of this, Srila Prabhupada gives from his own experience. In his younger days as a householder, he was a bit surprised and shocked when he heard his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, respond to the news that there was a poisonous snake in the ashram. His response was, kill it. Prabhupada, in that time, was shocked. Oh, I thought sadhus are, shanti, 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 and ahimsa, ahimsa, ahimsa. He didn't say anything at the time. He just kind of noted that and put it aside. Years later, I don't know how many years later, he read one of the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj in Canto 7, Chapter 9. Modeta sadhu rapi vrischika sarpahatya, that a sadhu is pleased when a snake or a scorpion is killed. Why does Prahlad Maharaj say that? It's something else, but he says that in the context of Hiranyakashipu having been killed. So he's referring to Hiranyakashipu as a scorpion or a snake. And his point is that sadhus, devotees, are pleased when a demon is killed, knowing that that person is being benefited. Now, don't take what I just said out of context, because that could cause more trouble. And that's an important, very important aspect of interpretation, is seeing things in context. But here is the point I'm making, is that Srila Prabhupada was a bit unsettled, let's say, by what he heard from his guru. But then, years later, when you read this line from the Bhagavatam, oh, now I understand. And his faith was already there, but it became even stronger on that particular point. But there was a time gap, so I hope that helps.
Well, just one little add-on. It's just the idea that within that time gap itself is the time when Shraddha will be impacted. Is there any suggestion about the mood with which to have that patience and wait?
Okay, for this we will turn to Satyanandan Swami.
First of all, thank you very much that you make us think. This is very necessary. So let me be, as far as I have understood Andre, it is perhaps good if we see if this is right, is in focusing on the essence, we might overlook an important detail which is necessary really to understand the essence. Is this correct? Or?
It's unnecessary. It's not necessary. It's an unnecessary detail, but the fact that we choose to overlook it because we don't understand it might negatively impact our faith in the things that are essential and important in the bhakti itself.
Oh.
So because we don't understand, maybe I don't understand maybe some of these things.
So my answer was, well, there can be a time gap. And he's saying, yes, but meanwhile, what about during the time gap? This is where I'm turning to you for help.
See, the whole issue we are discussing here is what keeps us from understanding Krishna, understanding the scriptures, and so on, and how can we understand without, suffering a lack of faith on the process and so on. I can only say that I'm very satisfied by an answer from one Shastra which says if you want to understand, you need 4 components, 4 items that help you understand and grow your faith. And if you leave one of these, you won't understand, because you are conditioned at the moment and you do make mistakes, and your perception is like that, it's clouded with filters. And that is, you hear from a guru, that's the first, but you can only learn 25% from in this way. The second is you must discuss what you have just now heard with fellow students, because they will for sure have heard it a little different than you, and their understanding will enrich your partial understanding. The third is, after hearing and discussing, you must refer to the original texts and do self-study, because in the third attempt to understand. You will again remove a few filters and a few things you have not understood. But then, so you have 25% you learn from a guru, 25% from discussion with peers, with other students to widen your understanding of what you heard. Another 25% of what you know you learn from self-study, you read, but now you're only with 75% of understanding. What helps you for total understanding? And the understanding that the verse says, Kala, time. It requires time. But it is not just waiting, or ignoring, or I personally feel in that time, this Cetudapanamarjanam, this clarifying the dust on the mirror of the mind, needs to be done. It takes time to cleanse our heart, our mind, our senses, our intelligence, our character from all the various pitfalls and all the various problems. And in this Kali Yuga, this is the card on which we have to, in my understanding, we have to put everything on this card, because that's all we have left in this age as a means to clear our perception that is done by the chanting of the holy name. I am not so sure if I have answered your question. I have. I tried my best. Was it a good answer, Krishna Chaitanya Maharaj? How will you say no? It was nonsense. What was it right on?
You got 5 stars out of 5.
Maybe your social conventions mix with our true eagerness to find out the truth. Anyways, Hare Krishna. But thank you, Maharaj. This is what we need in Sadhusanga. We need to question our points and discuss it.
Yes. So now we have Mahachvala from the Queen.
Actually, in the meantime, I found it. I wanted to ask where Lord Krishna likes the allegory. And then I found it in
obscure language.
Yeah, it says like the Vedic seers and mantras, however, deal in esoteric terms, and I also am pleased by such confidential descriptions. So it's 11, 21, 35. And I was also intrigued by the question of Rahim. You mentioned the attitude. Did you mention the attitude by which we would, we hear about, like beautiful example of Srila Prabhupada in this purport of that Bhagavatam verse, it deals with Jambudvip, and Srila Prabhupada ends up with, Radha Krishna Prema, Narottam Das Thakur, no ha Prabhupada Sutta. And then Prabhupada Saraswati says it's just phantasmagoria, So I connected that with the question, Maybe, if we neglect something on account of something else which is still within the Vedas. So, to me, what is coming is Maharaj Parikshit, he decided to hear in his last 7 days, he decided to hear about the length of the universe and all these rivers, and I think, he has only 7 days.
What does he care about?
He would say, Prabhu Nanda Sudha. But amazing that he hears in all these 7 days, he's hearing all these amazing descriptions. So it must be that his consciousness, accepts this as also the part of the Lord or something like this. It has its own time for the real focus. Maybe you can enlighten me.
Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for this wonderful class. And my question is regarding to interpretation. How could we interpret the same story told in different shastras, in different, sometimes contradictory ways? Should we try to reconcile all these different versions, or should we neglect one of these? For example, like Maharaj Parikshit and Takshaka is described in different ways in Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah. Yeah, this this question always comes up to haunt us. A common way that acharyas will deal with it is with kalpa veda nyaya. In this kalpa it happened like that, in that kalpa it happened like this. Two different kalpas, variations on the same story. That will be a typical way that it's dealt with. I like to think of it in a slightly different way, mainly because I have a very hermeneutics of suspicion type of mind. But I like to think that the pastimes of the Lord and His devotees are unlimited and always expanding. And what we're getting in one description is one portal, one peephole into it. And from another, we get another angle. And if you put the two people together who saw from this portal and that portal, and they ask each other, so, what happened? One will say, well, this is what happened. And the other will say, no, this is what happened. Actually, both happened, and more. And it's still happening. It's happening as we speak. That's how I like to think of it. There are sometimes different, various descriptions in different works of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. And sometimes they're very different. In the Chaitanya Chandradvai Nataka of Kavi Karnapura, when Lord Chaitanya arrives in Puri, he goes to the temple of Jagannath. He doesn't faint. He doesn't faint. But in Krishnadas Kaviraj's description, he faints. So which is it? Did he faint or did he not faint? Maybe some saw him faint and others didn't see that he fainted. Both are wonderful descriptions. And Lord Chaitanya is fainting. I like to think both and, rather than either or. Does that make any sense?
Hermeneutics is difficult.
Yeah, it can be very. It's a delicate thing. It's an art, actually, and therefore the Shastra Advisory Council put together this work, which I think it's very comprehensive, and I hope it will become available. We started having courses on this, short, but kind of just introducing how it works. And that's been given a few times, but in the last, I don't know, since COVID, somehow it slipped out of attention. I think it will be good if it becomes more part of our culture, of our society, because I think we have a bit of a problem, and sometimes more than a bit, of, we have an idea, it's like this, we have a quote, it's like this, and then someone else says, no, it's like this, and he or she has a quote, throws it out, and what do you get? You get sparks. And then that becomes a cause of concern because it can be a source of a challenge to faith. And it becomes, it can corrode. You know the word corrode? It's a process. What is corrode? Korodinati. Korodinati. So, Zalaj. That sounds worse. But this really can very much corrode our faith. There's, conflicting. I take this quote, you take that quote. No, there's a tradition of Vaishnava hermeneutics. How do we relate different statements? There's many, but it's very subtle. And it takes some time and discussion. And yes, what was it? Hearing, discussing, going back to the Shastra, and again, so that's the hermeneutic circle, going around and zeroing in. Hare Krishna, I think is now a good time to end. Thank you all so much for your kind and patience. And I wish you a wonderful day of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasam, Sakyam, Nivedanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana, not too, anyway, we won't go there. And at 11 o'clock, you're welcome. We'll talk more about 5th canto, and we'll do something fun also. Thank you. Do we have any announcements from
I would suggest we stay for a minute here. Half a minute. Someone, Brother Situ, is already getting Michael Mooney to give us an orientation.
Yeah.
Because everything is in a fluid of it's like a river. It changes by the minute. So
yeah.
The best is you.
Anyway, we're not in a big rush, right? We can always chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare.
So for those who were not here last evening, so today is Bimanirjal Ekadashi, and we will have some extra bhajans right after the seminar of Satyananda Maharaj, meaning like 6:45 or 7. So, I mean, the Pujari will do the arati, but we will sing for 3 hours or so some bhajans, so prepare yourself. And yes, we will have a planned seminars of Krishna Chatra Maharaj, Kailaji Prabhu, and Satyananda Maharaj. And I would also like to know about the prasadam. How many of you are how not to offend anyone. Yes.
You say there
So-
are different standards.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
one
So-
standard is to have a simple Ekadashi.
Yes, yes, we have Ekadashi.
without grace.
So the cooks are having deep discussions like, is it 80 or 100? Is it too much or too less? So can you just raise the hand who will take some prasadam? Okay. Yes, yes, I'm just feeling the pulse. Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, prasadam is already down and
Prasadam is usually the best prasadam, so if they cook more, it's good we take tomorrow.
makes sense.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Go, Prem.
Hey, hey, hey.